Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. I'm Sam. I'm your podcast host, and thank you for joining me. Our podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company. I'll talk about them and give them a shout out at the end of our episode here. Joining me today, good friend of mine, no stranger to the podcast at this point, our Fall Obsession staff manager from Michigan, Todd Sellon. Welcome back, Todd.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for having me. It's always great to see you. I always loved sitting down and talking to you, and it's a little cooler this time. I'm back in Michigan. So last time we were sitting in the Texas heat.
Yeah,
so
I was gonna.
I'm freezing here in Michigan.
I was gonna say I think this is the fifth podcast now that we've had you on total. 97, 98, the 2-part series for the Midwestern crew with that goose hunt that y'all had. That was your first appearance, and then back in July when you came down to Texas, you and I knocked out a couple episodes. I think 113, 114 are those. If folks want to go back and listen. Just kind of talking about not just you and your life and our Fall Obsession family, but also your hog hunt down here. So those are some great podcasts. But point being, it's been a minute since we were on here. As you said, the weather is much cooler. You guys are getting snow up there in Michigan right now, and it's finally nice and cold down here in Texas in the lows in the 20s and 30s. So I'm loving it at the moment. But
all that weight I lost when I was down there with you, I wish I had it back on now. It was pretty cold in the stand now. So.
Yeah, I know the feeling for sure. But anyway, we wanted to get into some hunt talk tonight. Obviously, it's November. It's deer season. We're right in the thick of it. And we'll talk here after a bit kind of about our staff being in the thick of it, with the success of this year. But I wanted to kick.
Incredible.
It is incredible, man. It is, and I know we'll talk about that. But I wanted to kick it off with you and your success, buddy, because you killed a stud of a buck. One of the I think it was one of the first bucks probably for Fall Obsession to hit the ground. 2 or 3 before you, but. You probably have the most inches on the ground right now, I would say.
I think so, which is very exciting to me because I do have a history with this buck. And, you look at it when you're in the field and you don't realize how big it is until you walk up. And the first thing I realized, I couldn't put my hand around its base. And then, again, when I brought it to the taxidermist, she asked me if I was going to get it officially scored. I'm like, I know it's a good buck. She's like, dude, you got to get this officially scored. I think it's a Pope Young. So she measured the main beams, and I was, like when I green scored it, I was about 3 inches off from her actual measurements, and she's much more experienced than I am at doing stuff like that. So She convinced me, you got to send it out and get this officially scored. So yeah, I did send a picture to the official scorer, and he said to me, he's like, dude, you're going to have to decide whether you want it scored as non-typical or as a typical. And non-typical means they don't deduct any points for abnormalities. So he did have a few. He had a split end, and then he had a split G3, I think it was. So there were a couple deductions there. But geez, for a non-typical, I think you have to score a minimum of 155. Yeah. And if this guy who's experienced, like I said, has a ton of experience, he's an official scorer, comes to me and says, hey, you're going to have to make this decision, I look at it and say, no way. There's no, I never in my dreams ever thought I would get something like that. So.
Yeah. And for our listeners, this buck is on your home farm, correct?
Yeah. It's right by my house.
Yeah. So, your home farm right up there in Michigan. So take us into it. Set the stage for us a little bit. You mentioned already that you had history with this deer. Tell us a little bit about that history and take us into this deer season and this hunt specifically.
So my daughter, Tala, she was born the beginning of October 5th to be exact. And so one of our traditions is that we go out and celebrate her birthday. I take her out on a hunt for her birthday. And 3 years ago when we went out, we sat in one of my shacks I had on the corner. And while we were sitting there, we happened to look across the field, and this massive buck came out from the west side of the field, so almost directly across. We're sitting on the east side. And my daughter looked at it through the binocular, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, he looks like an elk." And I'm like, yeah, you could see that from here. He was about 300 yards away at that point. And as he came across the field, he got bigger and bigger. And I thought, man, if I get a shot at this guy, I'm going to take him. And the closest he got was like 54 yards. And I didn't want to take a chance at a long shot at a really good buck.
Right.
So make a long story short, he ended up getting chased off by another bigger buck, both at 50 yards. And then through the rest of that season, I only saw him one other time when he was working toward me, and then he got wind of me and took off. And then since that time, and at that time, I figured he was probably about a 3-year-old deer, really nice buck. And again, this was 3 years ago. So now you're looking probably a 5 or 6-year-old buck, And so my daughter named him Mr. Elkie. Well, then the year after that, I ended up shooting a small buck because she wanted to see me shoot a buck. And then last year, we went out and we did that film, and we had talked about Mr. Bucky on that recording that we did, or Mr. Elkie, sorry.
Yeah.
On that recording that we did. So I saw him. I didn't see him the year after, but I saw him last year one time. So I tried to get on him, and never really worked out. I got him on video a couple times last year, but never really worked out to get a shot. This year, beginning of the year this year, when they first cut our corners just before our archery season, I went out because I saw they had cut my corner. I needed to change the batteries in my camera. So on our property, we have about 80 acres of corn in a rectangle. And then our back 13 acres, we rent out to the same farmer. So it's kind of like an L. And so the 80 acres next to us was all cut, but they hadn't got to the L part yet. So I drove out there, and that's where my camera is sitting, in that L part. So I drove out there, and all that corn was still up. I'm like, man, I can't drive through there with my quad. But there is a back way there through a 2-track. So I got off my quad and started walking down the 2-track, and I got into the woods. I don't know, maybe 10 yards. And I look up, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a buck standing right there. He was watching the combine cut the corn, and he lifted his head, and it wasn't Mr. Bucky, but he was really wide. This is my number 2 that I've been after. He's really wide, and I thought he was a 6-point. He's pretty thick as well. Yeah. And I got to about 15 yards from him, just sat there next to a tree and just watched him. He was just watching the combine and just eating and watching. Had no clue I was even there. So, anyway, I at that time I thought, this is my number 1 target buck. You know what I mean? This is the guy I'm going to get after here in the next week, because that's when archery started, in that next week. Well, Tala and I went out for her birthday hunt on the 4th this year, and she ended up. I could tell you the story a little bit later, but she ended up harvesting her first deer ever. Yeah. With a crossbow. And I can tell you right now. So as we were walking out, we are going to a stand on the west side of our property. It's a double tree stand, and it's got a shooting rail. It doesn't lift up. So you have to use a crossbow. Otherwise you move too much to get your bow up over the rail. So we're walking out, we got the crossbow, and Tala goes to me. She's like, Dad, can I be the shooter? And I go, no, Tala, you've never shot this before in your life. I go, you've never shot this. I don't want you to wound a deer. She goes, oh, come on, let me be the shooter. I'm like, no. And she goes, well, it's just like shooting a gun, right? I said, yeah. And she shot a gun. I got her a gun for her birthday. So she shot that. She sighted it in. So she's used to that. I go, yeah, it's just like shooting a gun. She goes, you just have to put the crosshairs up behind its shoulder, right? I said, yeah. She goes, does it kick? I go, no. She goes, well, let me be the shooter. I go, okay, you can be the shooter.
She's making her case pretty good there.
She's making her case. Yeah, she's making her case. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to go up there. We're probably going to get a crack at a deer. Because she hasn't practiced, she's probably not going to hit it, but we can say she got a crack at a deer. So we're in the stand as we're sitting there, I don't know, about a half hour. Tala like nudges me. She's like, there's a deer coming, and it didn't have horns. You can tell it didn't have horns. So I go, just wait. We want to make sure it's not a button buck. It got closer to us. We looked, sure enough, button buck. I go, don't shoot it. Don't shoot it. And she goes, okay. So it was underneath us eating and licking our ladder and doing all kinds of stuff, and eventually worked its way off. Well, a few minutes after it worked its way off, we look up again. There's another deer out there, and it's a bigger body. And so I go, Tala, I go, you're going to shoot this one. I go, you need to shoot this one, because I go, buck or doe, it doesn't matter. Well, he lifted his head up, and it was a nice little 6-point, really nice, really wide. Actually had some pretty good mass on it. It's probably about a 2. Actually, I think they aged him at about 3 years old. Just small antlers, 3 years old, because it field dressed at 170.
Wow.
So it was a big body deer.
Yeah.
So anyway, it comes right to us, and I got it on film. I think I sent you the film. It wasn't a very good film because I got so excited. But she put it right behind the shoulder and smoked that sucker right in the heart. I mean, she hit him right square in the heart.
That's awesome.
And so I'm like, first time ever shooting that. So going back to my story, the next time I went out, which was a few days later, sitting in my tree stand in the east side, which is where I sat. Well, I've been sitting to try to get after this number 2 buck. That's where I've been seeing him. And so at any rate, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden this buck comes out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this buck is huge. He's out at about 80 yards. So I'm thinking if he turns my way, I can get a crack at him. I can see him right now. I know he's probably about 130 class inch buck. Right behind him was this other buck that I had walked up on in the woods. So I thought, you know what? You're no longer my target buck. That first guy is my target buck. You're now number 2.
Yeah, it changed.
Yeah, it changed. And then behind him was another third buck that was a nice little 8-point. He was probably about a 3-year-old. He was big body. It might have been the other one that ran across by me today. I mean, really big body, 8-point. And all 3 of them were running together as a bachelor group. Never got a shot at him that night. But for the remainder of bow season, until I shot him, the number 1, the 130 class. So I thought, you know what I mean?
Right.
I would see him about once a week. And when he would show up, number 2 would show up. So it was always, he'd come out in the field, he'd eat it for a little bit. And then probably 10, 15 minutes later, number 2 would come out. Or as we started to get closer to the rut, he would come out with a couple does, kind of push him around a little bit. And then he would come, and then number 2 would show up. In fact, the last time I saw him before, let me think. No, actually. So anyway, they kept doing that. Well, one night I was sitting in my stand and getting kind of dark. It was right at the end of last light. And I take my arrow out of my bow, put it in my quiver, hook my bow up, turn around and look, and there's a buck right behind me. There's a deer right behind me. I'm like, oh boy. And I see his antlers. You can see his antlers. You can see he's outside his ears. And I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? He's a good buck. He's a good body buck. If he comes in, I'm going to get a crack. I'm going to take a shot at him.
Yeah.
So I take my hoist off my bow. I knock my arrow back in. Sure enough, he comes in right next to me. I range him real quick, 10 yards. I didn't get a really good look at his antlers other than I knew he was outside his ears. You know what I mean? So 10 yards. So it happened so quick. So I drew back, put it on his shoulder, and then I didn't compensate for the fact that I was 25 feet up in the tree. So 10-yard shot at 25 feet up in the tree, you know, your aim point has to change a little bit.
Yes,
you know
it
what
does.
I mean?
Absolutely.
I didn't change it. I aimed where I normally would aim at 10 or 15 feet up in the tree. And I shot and smacked him. It sounded just like my arrow hit a tree. He spins and takes off running. So I get down shortly after. I start looking. I can't find where he kicked up dirt. I can't find where he turned leaves over. I can't find anything. I go over to where he goes into the woods. I can't find blood. I go back on the trail that he ran in on. I can't find my arrow. I can't find any brush. I can't find anything. So I call Heather. She comes out with me, and we're looking all over this woods, looking for a white belly at this point because we can't find any sign of. I know I hit him because I can see my arrow sticking out of him, but we can't find any sign. And so we never do find him. We don't find my arrow. We don't find any sign. So we go back in the house, and you know, in my mind, I'm thinking I just screwed up a good shot on a really nice buck.
Yeah.
And so next time I go out, I have a couple does, 2 or 3 does that come out from the east side of the field, and I'm sitting on the west side, and they're running right at me. They're coming right at me, and then they kind of veer off, and then sure enough, here comes the big buck. Here comes the 130, chasing him, coming right after him, and he hangs up with them at about 80 to 100 yards. And they're just kind of out in the field eating, and he's bumping the does. Pretty soon, number 2 comes out, and he's following him. So he's chasing them. The does run off into the woods. the 130 class kind of follows them, and down the wood line, it kind of cuts, cuts in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where there's more corn right up against the wood, but it kind of U's in. I can't see once he gets behind that little corner. So sure enough, the 130 goes in towards the does, and number 2 goes right in that area. And all of a sudden I hear horns just smack, 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 smack. And I'm thinking, you son of a gun, don't break those antlers. Those are my antlers. You son of a gun. So then my hope was that they would chase each other toward me. And again, that never did happen. So again, this is after I missed that first buck, and they were fighting and sparring. So the next time I go out, same stand on the west side, sitting there, and the 130 class comes out across the field on the east side, underneath my other stand, stands there and eats forever, 20 yards away. So I text Heather. I'm like, man, I screwed up. I sat in the wrong stand tonight again. And this is the same stand I got a shot at that other decent buck out of. And so I'm sitting there throughout the night. He goes off into the woods. And as I'm sitting there, pretty soon a couple does come out. One doe comes right underneath my stand and starts eating. Like, she is literally right underneath me eating. A second doe comes out, and she's out in the cornfield eating at about 60 yards away or so. And then as I'm sitting there, I look up and I see the 130 class. He comes out of the woods, probably at about 150 yards away. And he's making a beeline right for these does that are in the field. I'm like, oh man, he's coming right at us, So now I'm starting to get excited. And then I'm thinking, if he comes to the one right under my stand, I'm going to get a shot at this guy. With my luck and the way my hunting often goes, he went to the other one that was 80 yards away. And as he went to her, she bounded off into the woods. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's it. I'm not going to see this guy. So now I'm debating. I got this doe, really nice doe, right underneath me. I could shoot her. We got some meat in the freezer.
Right.
Or I can just wait to see what happens. So as I'm sitting there, a few minutes later, the doe that went off in the woods, she comes bounding back. Boop, boop, boop. And then kind of stops at about 40 yards. I'm like, man, I need her to come by me, because if he comes back, he's going to walk right by me and I'm going to get a shot. So sure enough, she goes by me. And then a few minutes later, I look up. Here he is, nose to the ground, grunting like crazy. And I get a really good look at his rack, and my heart just starts going, brr, 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 you know what I mean? And for all you guys who who have hunted before, bow hunting in particular, and you get that adrenaline rush, particularly when you're younger, and the buck fever, you feel like your heart is just going to jump right out of your chest.
Yep.
I had that going pretty bad.
It ain't just young guys, okay? It is young, old, and anywhere in between, in my opinion, for the most part. The issue is I'm old enough now where I might have a heart attack, but yeah, you have other health concerns when that happens.
So anyway, that doe walks by me, and now he turns his head and aims right for the doe that's right underneath me. And then, so now he's about 20 yards out broadside. I got a clear shot. I don't have a clear shot because he's behind a branch. So I need him to clear this branch, and then I have a clear shot at him broadside. The doe that's behind me also just kind of bounds boop, out from underneath me, and then follows the other doe. When she does that, he takes 2 steps, bounds where she was, and lands right underneath me.
Oh,
and so now he's just standing there looking at the does. And I'm like, gosh, he's 5 yards away. Literally straight down. I range him 5 yards. I'm like, all right, so how am I going to do that? How am I going to do this? Well, I can't just aim straight down because I'm sitting down because my knees are in the way. So since he was looking at the other doe, his attention was completely on the does.
Right.
He was broadside, but he was looking at the does. And so I just stood up really quietly and then compensated for the angle this time and drew back and smacked him. And again, my arrow was sticking out. I thought it was sticking out pretty far, but I really wasn't sure. So he turns, and I didn't hear the big thud that you don't normally hear when you hit lungs, when you hit rib cage. He turns, his tail wasn't flickering, nothing. He turns, just kind of trots, and went right into the woods. And as he went into the woods, I see white. And typically when you fall over, you can see that white kind of flashing through the woods. Mm-hmm. And I saw a quick white flash, and I thought, did he fall over right there? Well, the 2 does that he was following spin around, and they kind of go to the corner where he went in and just stood there and just stare. They just stare in that corner. I'm like, man, he might be down right there. So I text Heather, just shot a big boy. And she's like, did you find him? I'm like, no. She goes, well, it doesn't count until we find him. I'm like, yeah, you're right, because of what happened last time when I shot that other deer.
Right.
So, so sure enough, I wait 15 minutes. I'm like, I got to get down and start looking. I'm sure there's blood everywhere. You know what I mean? Because of the angle and just because I smoked him. I get down and I go where he went into the woods, and these doe were still staying there. They run off, of course. I go where he went into the woods, look down, don't see any blood. Okay. So then I start kind of looking around again for my arrow, for leaves, for any sign. I can't find anything again.
Oh man.
So I'm like, is this how my whole season's going to go? What is going on? I have a 5-yard shot. I have a 10-yard shot. There's absolutely no sign. I can't find this deer anywhere. So I just follow a deer trail down to the ridge back behind my stand. And I'm just kind of looking around, and I'm getting really frustrated. I'm texting Heather like crazy and was really frustrated in some of my language. And so Heather was trying to be supportive. And so I go back to where he went in, and I look down, and there's just a little drop of blood, just a small little drop of blood. I'm like, okay, there's a little bit. Well, I had gone directly west because I thought that's where he went. Usually they go down a gully and a ravine, and then they go in the deeper woods. I hadn't gone north, and north of where he went in the woods was a bunch of brush pile. So I thought, well, sometimes they go under the brush pile and just kind of pile up under the brush pile.
Yeah.
So I go to the brush pile and I start looking under the brush pile, and I'm looking. I'm like, I don't see anything. And I turn, and there's a white belly right next to me.
Oh man,
I'm like,
there he is.
are you kidding me? So I jump, I go right over there. Yes, I got him. He ran like 30 yards and just piled up.
Wow.
So as we were field dressing him, what I had realized was that I did compensate for the angle. I did put a great shot on him. I split his heart rate into two. And
Wow.
I'm thinking what happened was he was dead before he was able to, because a lot of that blood that you get is from them breathing and exhaling and that sort of thing. I'm thinking he was done before he even had a chance to exhale. And that's why I didn't find any blood until we found him,
Huh.
And so.
Wow, man.
So later on, as we were getting the cape off, we realized that he had been shot.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So he had been shot on the same side that I had shot that one, and we couldn't find any side. And so what we realized was I hit him a little bit lower than what I thought.
Right.
Actually, I didn't hit him lower. I hit him exactly where I thought, because the scar was right about mid rib.
But with your angle, yeah.
Yeah. So what happened, and the lung was actually sliced. That lung on that side was sliced. It didn't go
Really?
through it, but it was sliced. Yeah. And the other lung wasn't touched at all. So I'm thinking it sliced and then just pushed the other lung aside. And then it didn't exit, but it hit the hide on the other side. So there was like still some fresh blood on that side, on the opposite side.
Man, these animals are far tougher than we give them credit for, and I've never talked to somebody who experienced it, so it's awesome that you're sharing that. I've read articles and stuff about deer that have like been shot. Hunter felt like it was a decent shot, never found the deer, minimal blood. They get them either later in the year or the next year, and they find evidence of an injury like that where a vital was nicked or something like that, but they healed, they recovered, they bounced back. It's crazy.
To me, the most astonishing thing was the fact that I was in the exact same stand. I had shot him once before. Typically, when you get a mature deer like that, once they know that there's a danger there, you don't see him again.
Yeah.
This guy came to the exact same spot, even closer. And I got a second shot at him. So I did play Powerball, because that's when it was in the billions at that point. And my luck was better deer hunting that.
Man, that is so crazy. Not just all of the elements of the story, not just the history of the deer leading up into it, but the fact that it was that deer, that caliber of buck, is just it's the icing on the cake at that point. That is incredible. And
like I said, you hunt all your life for a deer like this. a lot of people, when they get a deer this big, they go to outfitters where they really do a good job of managing their herd, and they put requirements on the size of deer that they can shoot, 130, 140, 150 class deer, and they have them out there. Free ranging behind my house, we don't have a lot of 130, 140, 150 class deer just running around.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we have made a conscious effort of letting a lot of the little bucks go over recent years because we want to grow them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our neighbors, a couple years ago, I think it was during quarantine, actually, that summer between COVID and the second wave of quarantine where we started to get locked down again, that we had a group of big bucks in our back field, and every night during the summer we'd go out there, and a lot of the neighbors would go out there glassing and looking at all these bucks, and we ended up coming together as a group and kind of deciding on what type of deer management we want in this area, you know. And my whole thing, originally when I first started hunting, my whole thing was it's got to have at least 6 points. Well, then as I evolved, throughout the years, I thought, well, now let's look at age. Let's look at mass. Let's start looking at some of the other characteristics we need to grow big bucks.
Yeah.
And it was probably when I first joined Fall Obsession, that's when I really got serious about, hey, even the 2-year-olds, we got to start letting some of these 2-year-old go unless there's something going on, like an injured deer, or like my daughter has never shot one before, or that buck that I shot, she just wanted me to shoot a deer, so I shot a little 1.5-year-old 6-point just because I wanted her to experience that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but to have a buck like this and to see our efforts have paid off, it's like, oh my goodness. And to have this history, like I said, I didn't realize that was Mr. Elke until my neighbor flat out said, that's Mr. Elke. That's a buck you've been chasing for years. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think you're right. You're right. And so it was an incredible experience. I said to Heather, I will probably never have a buck like that again. I mean, we can try. You can manage the deer herd, but ultimately you can't manage your neighbors. You can't manage your people. And I understand that everybody has different philosophies on hunting.
Yeah.
Some people hunt for meat. Some people hunt for trophy. Some people, a spike is a trophy deer. That's perfectly fine. If that's what makes them happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we can only do our part managing our herd. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. And like I said, to have a deer like this, it's like all of our efforts have paid off. All the blood, sweat, and tears we put on in the summer, we accumulate in the summertime, and all the effort, all the energy, and all the work, it just kind of paid off. And it was to get that feeling of your heart jumping out of your chest, like you're a 15, 16-year-old kid in the woods when a 4-point walks in front of you. It's honestly when you hunt for so long, you still get that rush, but not to that extent. And to feel that adrenaline, that intense, that's one of the reasons why I got into hunting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because I love that adrenaline rush and everything just came for full circle. I could see my whole hunting career just come and take shape in this one little experience. You know what I mean?
It takes you back, man. It 100% takes you back. That's for sure. And you can hunt for, as you've already alluded to, numbers of years and get into the meat hunting grind, and does, management, bucks, hunting for meat, all that kind of stuff, and it does kind of wither away, but then you get a buck like that, and it just it all comes rushing back. So I completely understand.
Yep. Exactly. And so since that time, number 2 has been showing up every second or third day. I haven't seen him until tonight. I saw him for the first time in a week and a half. He had been showing up over on the east side, so that's why I've been sitting on the east side. Every time I see him, he's either right by my stand, or he's coming up on the corner by my stand, or just around the corner, or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why I've been focusing more on the east side, because that's where I've been seeing him. Well, then tonight he comes out on the west side, which would have been the exact same stand that I shot this guy out of.
That cat and mouse game starts all over again.
It sure does. Yeah, it sure does. So, and like I was telling you, Sam, typically once we get into gun season, usually the 3rd or 4th day, then we really start looking at filling our freezer with does and that sort of thing. And tomorrow is the 3rd day of gun season. So really after tomorrow, probably more so on Friday, we'll start looking for does. However, number 2 is still out there.
Yeah.
So it's going to be harder for me to go out and just shoot does. And if I know number 2 is out there, I told Heather last night, I was telling you before we started that, because Heather said we're getting low on meat, that we need to start putting some does in the freezer. And I said, well, we might have to wait till December to start putting does in the freezer. Let's just wait and see. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I've got, like, for me, I got a doe pretty early in the year, and then I shot a management buck a week ago or so, and then our with the colder weather and everything, the rut starting to kick in down here in Texas and everything. My hope is that maybe, as it did last year, it brings in some mature deer that we hadn't seen before. I'm at least trying to hold on to my mature buck tag to give me a chance to get a crack at something that maybe I'm not expecting to walk out in front of me. And after that, it's game on. I'm 100% after that point going to stick my mature tag on a more mature management buck, because we have a lot of management deer on Texas dirt this year that need to go off, and then try to finish out the doe tags and stuff. And there's no reason I should not tag out this year and have a full freezer, because I'm a meat hunter at the end of the day, but we're all, like you've mentioned, your conscious efforts, we're also trying to manage our population and shoot the deer that are mature or need to be shot. And
for sure,
I will say, if I end up shooting a management buck, there is a 6-point out on our place with a 20-inch inside spread.
You said that the other day.
Yeah.
That would be incredible. Yeah.
Me and Nick are going to be jockeying for that one to see who gets to him first. So.
So the management buck, you said you already shot. You said it was a call deer, right?
Yeah, so I guess that's a good segue into the other thing I want to talk with you about, since you being our staff manager, you've kept up with you keep up with our staff year round, but obviously during hunting season you're keeping up with the kills, and it has been one heck of a year for Fall Obsession staff. We haven't seen success like this from our staff members before.
We had some kills early. We had Michael that had to kill a doe before he got his buck tag in Indiana in early September. And TJ down in Florida actually got our first buck. I think that was in September too, with a muzzleloader, a nice little 8-point. And then Steven got a doe, and we had Tyler got 2 does out in Kansas. And then we went, a couple weeks without hearing anything. But man, then all of a sudden, as we got closer to rut, I think we went, 12 days in a row where we had at least one. There were multiple days where we had, more than one deer put down in a day. You know what I mean?
And for our listeners who aren't familiar, we're talking our staff in general. We have pro and field staffers spread out throughout the country in dozens of different states, in different regions and everything. So what Todd and I are talking about here is everybody combined, kind of our Fall Obsession hunt report from the country. We're tracking all these staff members who are putting deer down, and like you said, 12 days consecutive with a deer hitting the ground, mostly bucks, I believe, too. So. Mostly
bucks, mostly really good bucks too. Yeah, really good bucks.
Yeah.
And then we went, I think, the last 2 days without anything, and then Corey shot a nice 6-point pointer today, and so he started the streak over again today. So we'll see if we can continue this. Maybe I can get number 2 on the ground tomorrow.
Yeah, we're hoping so. And I know we're tracking our staff, but I know that they and their families are also being successful and everything like that. I've had a few staffers either on the message board or text or whatever say, my cousin or my nephew, or I know Drew, he had some family take some deer down, and then that might literally, as we were about to kick off this podcast, my dad, who's hunting right now and I'm not, he texted me saying he shot a doe tonight. So it's happening, man. And you mentioned the buck that I killed and everything, and I got to.
So what is a call buck, first of all? So tell people what a call buck is.
Yeah, so callback, at least if I can say it right, cullbuck. There we go. In my neck of the woods is a deer that we need to get out of the herd. It's a deer that we do not want breeding or passing on genetics or anything like that. It's a deer that's never going to be anything. Sometimes it can be a funky looking deer with crazy horns, and that's when we're talking bad genetics. You don't want to replicate that, if you will, or it could just be a mature deer that doesn't have a big rack or anything, and it's just he's never going to be anything. He's ready to go. So That being said, we have a lot of coal deer this year on Texas dirt. Last year, it seemed like we had some better caliber mature deer, some of which I probably should have shot. That's a sore subject. We won't go there tonight. We all know how. If you've been following us through last year, you know what I'm talking about.
Those are your Halloween costume, right?
Yeah, my Halloween costume contributed to it. Go look at that end of October on our social media pages. But needless to say, we had a pretty significant drought here in Texas over the summer, and I think that was a big contributing factor into some of the lack of antler growth that we probably saw this year. And we have a lot of 7 points, which is weird. A lot of 7 points on our property. And I say a lot. It's not like they're running rampant, but I have pictures of at least 4 or 5 different 7 points across the entire property, which is unusual. A lot of smaller 8s, and then I mentioned the big 6 earlier. That I personally would probably consider that a trophy. Truly, he's a coal buck, but any deer with a 20-inch inside spread to me is a big deer. So I'd love to kill that thing. But all it is to say, this deer that I shot, he was what I refer to as a cow horn buck. Similar to a spike. He has no branched antlers.
Gotcha.
So 2 points really if you're counting points. But it's not like a spike, like just a little 2-3 inch little antler. He's got more length to his beams and everything. So typically my yearling bucks are who I would expect to be my spike deer, and this deer was a 2-year-old deer. And my deer, if they're 2 years old, I want to see either 4 points or 6 points on them, at least right now with the way that our property is. So if I don't have 4 or 6 points on them, or better, obviously, then in my opinion, that's a coal deer and one that we want to take out of the herd. So this buck came in. It was several hard days of hunting, and this buck came in and gave me a shot opportunity, and I wasn't going to pass it up. So meat in the freezer, a deer that needed to come out of the herd, and everybody's happy. So.
Gotcha. So when I brought my daughter's deer into the taxidermist, there was a guy who owns a deer farm, and my cousin is my taxidermist. And she asked me how old I thought it was. I said, it's probably about a 2-year-old deer. That's what I guessed. Well, when this guy came in, my cousin asked him, well, how old do you think this deer is? He's like, I don't know. He goes, it's hard to tell without looking at the teeth. He goes, how much do you field dress? I said, 170. He goes, 170? He goes, he's got to be at least a 3 or 4 year old deer. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, he's probably a 3 or 4 year old deer with small antlers. So when you mention that as part of the call buck, I guess you could probably consider her as a call buck as well, And you had mentioned also the drought in Texas. Geez, when I was down there, it was almost 120 degrees.
Yeah, we were hunting in 112, 115 degree temps, hunting pigs in the summer, but yeah.
Yep. Yeah, not hunting deer. Yeah.
Yeah, not deer hunting.
And so up here, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, when we field dressed my daughter's deer, man, he had like 1.5 inch thick layer of fat on him. And typically that's a sign that it's going to be a pretty hard winter. And so even looking at the Farmer's Almanac certainly says that we're going to have a long fall and a long winter, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which means that winter is not going to start till later. Well, winter has started here. It started yesterday, actually.
A switch flipped down here in Texas because I mentioned several hard days of hunting in this most recent trip where I killed the coal buck. My dad and I hunted out there for 5 days at the beginning of general season or rifle season here in Texas. I was still bow hunting, but basically it opens up to everybody at that point. We hunted for the first 5 days of the season, and temps were in the 70s, 80 degrees high. It only got down into maybe the 50s at night, if mostly 60s, and the deer activity was slow. I was off work and it was my opportunity to be out there, so that's why I stayed out there. I was trying to make something happen. In 5 days of hunting, I saw 4 deer, and the 4th deer is the one that I shot. So that gives you, and we're on 807 acres with close to 10 different setups out there this year. So it gives you an idea on, where we're at. And I hunted multiple different spots. But 2 days after we come home, it changes. And I mentioned, my dad's been out. I had to go back to work yesterday, and my dad went out, but he's self-employed, so he makes his own hours. So he packed up and left yesterday to go out there by himself, and he's been out there 2 days, and he's killed 2 deer now. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the 2 days that we didn't fill our tags, we could include your dad in it. So around today, 14
yeah,
or 15
my dad can be the honorary member. He kept the streak going. He was out there getting it done.
Going.
So
yeah. No, but typically here in Michigan, early October, you get 60, 70-degree temps, and then about second or third week in October, you start to see it kind of tail off a little bit, 40s, 50s. We were getting 60, 70. And then we had a spell there for a week. We were in the 40s all week. So that was really awesome because we would see 20, 30, 40 deer every sit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which was awesome. So then all of a sudden we get a week of 75, and then we get 80, and then we get snow and 30, and then 80 the next day. So it's been a roller coaster until, like I said, this week it started to cool off. And then we got about 3 inches of snow yesterday. So the first day of rifle season, I was watching different reports because I was at school. I couldn't get out in the morning, but, the different reports were saying deer just aren't moving. They're locked down. They're hunkered up because it's snowing so hard. It was snowing hard all day. And then today it didn't snow until the evening. It started snowing a little bit. And it got warm enough where the snow that we got yesterday melted. So it was like, I think it was 37, 38 degrees when I went out this afternoon after school, but all the snow had melted at that point. And then now we're under a winter weather advisory. And Michael down in southern Michigan, Michael's about 2 hours south of me. He texted me. I think you were in that text thread too. They already got 6 inches of snow today.
That's crazy.
And then they're under a winter storm warning for the next 2 days.
That is crazy. Yeah, and so, Michael's another one that has that's been very successful this season. I actually a couple weeks ago recorded a podcast with him, episode 129, over his success over there in Michigan and Indiana and all that stuff over there, because he's killed early in November. He killed 2 very nice bucks just a few days apart on different properties.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was within a week time span, I think.
Yeah, just over a week. So that was truly a great conversation with him. So just for our listeners, if you haven't listened to 129, go back and listen. So.
And his wife shot a nice doe.
Yeah, actually, it was funny. I podcasted with him the night that his wife shot that doe.
Shot the doe.
He sent that. Right. Him and I had it on the books to podcast that night, and. He sent that text in the group thread that his wife shot a doe, and I was like, "Hey, man, if you're occupied tonight, I understand. We can reschedule." And it was a few minutes before he responded. He's like, "Nope, I just got out of the shower. Let's do this." And I was like, "All right, sounds good." And so that's what's really cool. That's why I like podcasting. As things are happening, in the thick of it during hunting season, with guys like Michael, who his wife shot a doe that night, and he had just drug that thing out of the woods and gotten showered and gotten cleaned up, and he hopped on a podcast. Or you're talking about literally hunting today, just a couple hours ago and everything.
A couple hours ago, I was out there chasing number 2.
And Nick and I and my dad, we've podcasted this season already from deer camp and everything. So it's just, I love that element of our show that we're able to, just bring that sense of the here and now to our hunting season on our podcast. So it's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And Michael's wife had a similar experience to me. She shot a really nice buck early, and they tracked it for quite a ways and ran out of blood. I think actually the neighbor wouldn't allow them to go on and continue tracking it. And then it showed back up to the exact same spot that it got shot at. You know what I mean? She originally shot in. Yeah. And showed up on camera. Yeah.
That's an element to the story that probably hadn't been told yet at this point. But you had mentioned the neighbor and everything, and not to repeat his story or anything. But I use the point to emphasize that brought on a very interesting topic that Michael covered on our podcast and our couch chat video series, talking about just hunter ethics, etiquette, and kind of the courtesy factor behind behind being a hunter, and
Yeah.
with a friend that was local to him out there. So that is, and those are really just true, genuine, authentic conversations. That's podcast episode 125. If anybody's
Yeah, for sure.
interested, or couch chat episode number 5 if you want to watch the video version. But go check those out, because Michael turned a very frustrating experience into, I believe, a very educational experience for other hunters out there. And that's what one of the things I love about what we do is we, you know, we're blue collar hunters, same as everybody that's listening to this podcast. And all that we're trying to do here is share our information and our experiences in an educational format for everybody out there. Educational yet entertaining and enjoyable at the same time, obviously. But
Very much so. And you know, you talk about it being educational. We have some that don't play nice either. Some neighbors, particularly on this cornfield that I hunt. You know, we live on a 56-acre farm, and then across the street, Heather's dad has 27. Originally, it was one big farm, and then they put a road in to split it up into 56 and 27 acres. And so, mostly hardwoods. We got a swamp right in the middle, and then, like I said, the back 13 acres is all corn, and then the front 6 or 7 acres is also corn with a ravine and gully in the back. And so I set my stands up on the east and west of the cornfield, because it's about 400 yards, 300 or 400 yards across. And so the neighbor that's 2 neighbors over has done things like years ago. He used to go out and park in the field. And when deer would come out, he would flash his lights, beep his horn. He would always come out in prime time. So yeah, so that's just a little thing that we have dealt with in the past, and so it's gotten better since. But still little things, and so we just grin and try to play nice, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just keep to ourselves and keep to our ethics, and try to keep doing our what we want in our philosophy of managing deer and that sort of thing, and hoping that they pay off. So
yeah. Well, if you're a listener and you are having struggles with a pesty neighbor like that, again, podcast episode 125, Michael Teepee. Go listen to it. It's a good one. So
he's very passionate.
He is very passionate in a very professional way. So
yes, absolutely, yeah. Because when it's not you deal with something like that, it's so frustrating. It could very easily turn negative real quick in a bad way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, yep, I felt that frustration before. So
absolutely, many of us have.
Yep.
Well, Todd, man, it's been awesome sitting down talking to you. We're getting toward the end of our time. I loved hearing about your deer and the history behind it, and obviously how it all played out. I know we'll be back on here again before the season's over, I'm sure. But we'll try to make a point to get it after the 60-day period, after you get that deer scored and everything. That way we can get an idea for exactly how big it is and everything. And you know, awesome talking about our Fall Obsession staff success this year so far too. And I mean, we still got a month and a half, 2 months left of hunting season, so it ain't over yet.
And so I've been a part of this since 2018, and we have never, I mean, you hear about success stories periodically throughout the season. Not like this. It's every day. In fact, I think yesterday I sent out a thread, okay, who got one today? You know what I mean? Or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
No, this is unlike any year that we've had before. So I'm stoked. I'm excited for everybody. It's awesome to see. So, and
we have that crane hunt, you know, talking about hunts, we have that crane hunt coming up here next month too. So we just had a meeting this past weekend, and then we put a storyboard together, and so we're looking at doing a production meeting here soon too. So hopefully we can turn into a nice video like the bow fishing trip that was just aired today, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Looking forward to that production and making that happen as well. So it'll be awesome. Yeah. Well, on that note, as we conclude for our podcast listeners, we've talked about our staff, we've talked about these productions, little bits and pieces behind all that. And if you guys want to see everything that we do at Fall Obsession, go to our website, fallobsession.com. That's the hub. Everything stems out of there, and we literally, thanks to all of our staffers, I should say, we've literally covered hundreds of different topics in different capacities in the hunting and outdoor industry at this point. I'm sure that there is something on there for everybody at this point. We have All of our video series are on there. We have educational videos and articles on there, gear reviews, wild game recipes, our podcasts, and more. So be sure that you head on over to Fall Obsession. Be sure that you go to the bottom of any page and subscribe to our newsletter, because Todd does a great job working with our regional coordinators to send out a monthly report or newsletter from each region of the United States every month. So it's awesome to see that, and not just what's in your region, but what's coming out of the other ones. Our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, go wild, go like and follow and do all that good stuff on there. We post daily hunting and outdoor content, authentic hunting and outdoor content, as well as our YouTube channel. Go subscribe to that. We post multiple new videos on there a week. Todd mentioned the bow fishing video from their recent experience. Our podcast videos are on there. Our Texas Dirt series covering Nick and I's hunts down here in Texas. That's an awesome series too. We got all sorts of cool stuff on there. At the time that this podcast is coming out too, we're going to actually have a feature episode in our My Obsession series on Todd, also on the YouTube channel by then. So I know
On
Todd,
Saturday, I think, right?
Yeah, it'll be on the 19th is when it's going to be published. So yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, coming up. So all the socials, YouTube, go check all those out. And whatever podcast platform that you guys are listening on, be sure you hit that follow and or subscribe button, and make sure your notifications are turned on. That way you know when we drop a new podcast. We publish a new podcast episode every single Monday morning, and we're very diligent about that. We're also on Waypoint TV and Carbon TV. Those are other places that you can stream our podcast, and our video series Texas Dirt and Couch Chats are also on Carbon TV as well. So be sure you go check all that out. Finally, Ridge Rock Hunt Company is the podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they book hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. Derek has a very large network of vetted outfitters in North America, and he will work with you to set up whatever kind of hunt you're looking for, where you're looking for, work with you on the budget, the timeline, all that kind of stuff. Just give him a call and just start exploring those options with him. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company, go check them out on social media and on their website. Todd, I enjoyed it, man, as always, and we'll get you back on here again.
Absolutely. And you know what? Everybody's got to stay obsessed, because we are, right?
Absolutely. We are obsessed this year for sure, my friend, for sure. All right, guys. Thank you all for listening to another Fall Obsession podcast. Might be me, might be Drew next week. We'll have to wait and see, but we will be back either way, and we'll catch you then.